Today's lesson is all about how to understand and play in 6/8 time signature, as well as a couple other time signatures that are related. Starting with 6/8, I want you to notice maybe a couple of things that are different or off compared to a 4/4 or 2/4 time signature. And if you need more time, pause the video because I'm going to tell you right now. The two differences is there are 6 individual eighth notes, with the eighth note now being counted as one beat. So if the eighth note was worth half a beat before, and it's now worth a whole beat, we have doubled the value of the eighth note. Therefore, all of the other note values are doubled as well. Quarter note now gets 2 beats. Half note now gets 4 beats. Dotted half note now gets 6 beats. Whole note now gets 8 beats. So on and so forth. That's the biggest adjustment you're going to have when first playing in 6/8, that the eighth note gets 1 beat and not the quarter note. Another thing you may have noticed about 6/8 is that it's grouped into these groupings of 3. Remember in 4/4, 2/4 that we had the groupings of eighth notes in 2, and now it's 3. And one thing I want to tell you is that 6/8 loves to split itself into halves. Its measures into halves, with a group of 3 being on one half of the measure and a group of 3 being on the other half of the measure. So instead of counting, it can be counted as 6 individual beats like we played, but it can also be 1, 2, 1, 2, where I'm still playing the 6 individual beats here, but I'm only counting 2. And that's why we call 6/8 a compound time signature, because it can be counted 2 ways, in 6 and also in 2. A lot of these other time signatures that end in 8 are also compound time signatures, but things like 4/4, 3/4, and 2/4 can only be counted in one way, and those are called simple time signatures. This one, compound. So while the measures love to be split up into these 2 groupings of 3s, it doesn't always look that way. Sometimes it's a little more confusing. So my question for you is, for this measure, is this split up into 2 halves of 3? Well, let's take a look at this dotted quarter note first. And I have a question for you. In 4/4, how much was the dotted quarter note worth? And hopefully you said 1.5. So if it's doubled now, 1.5 plus 1.5, hopefully you remember from elementary school or maybe middle school, that equals 3. So we know this one gets 3, and because we're in 6/8, we already have 3 beats taken up. So this will take up beats 4, 5, and 6, those 3 beats there. And let's take a look here. So we have our eighth note worth 1 beat, and this is going to be worth 2, 3. So even though this measure has not quite split into the even groupings of 3, this one is, it still is split into groups of 3, with one half being over here and the other half being over there. So this type of measure in 6/8 is totally okay. You're going to see in 6/8, and the point I'm getting to here is you're going to see a lot of dotted quarters, a lot of quarters with eighth notes next to them because those equal 3. You're going to see a lot of things add up to 3 on one side or the other. Now, a lot of questions you may have is, Tim, can it not be split into those 2 equal parts? Yes, but if you do that, you're talking about some kind of syncopation. We're not going to get too far into that today, but I'm letting you know as a beginner, 99% of the time, it's going to be split into those 2 halves. Now, so a little exception here is this dotted half note. A dotted half note in 4/4 used to get 1, 2, 3 beats. It now takes up the whole measure, 6 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you may see a lot of dotted half notes as well. That's basically the whole note equivalent in 6/8. Speaking of whole notes, you don't see any in 6/8. At least most of the time you won't. Sometimes you'll see an editor slip one in. And if you ever do see one in 6/8, it means that it's just taking up the whole measure. It's basically the equivalent of that in 6/8. But hopefully you see this and not this one. This one's a no-no because remember, we only have 6 beats to work with. A whole note got 4 beats before. Now it's worth 8, which is too many. That's why the measure is highlighted in red. Not even my notation software wants me to do it. So I have a question for all you students. Is this measure split into 2 halves? Well, you may look at it and be like, clearly it is, Tim, but it's not. Because remember, the half note now gets, remember that we want the split to happen here, right? This half note is going to take up beats 1, 2, 3, and 4. Oh no, we crossed over too far into this realm, and this only has the last 2 beats. So while this type of measure can happen in 6/8, it would just be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a lot less common. Like I said, you'd have some kind of syncopation going on. And so you're going to see a lot less half notes or quarter notes, a lot more dotted quarter notes, dotted half notes, and eighth notes paired to quarter notes. Question: is this one split into 2 equal halves? Well, I just said you're going to see half notes paired with quarter notes. So, you got 1 here. This is worth 2. So 1, 2, 3. I meant to write this 2 here. And this is going to be 4, 5, 6. So we do indeed have a nice even split. So that is something that you would see in 6/8. What about this one? So we have eighth note with a dotted quarter. So let's just write out our beats. So you got beat 1, and then this we get 3 beats, right? 2, 3. Our line is here, but this one takes up too many. And if we have a cross over, we've kind of goofed up a little bit. So you're not going to see a lot of rhythm patterns like that. As you can see, even the way that looks is pretty confusing. Okay, now the question you may have, we're going to shift gears into 3/4 for a second. Oh, here we go. I'll just have to show it like that. Now the question you may be having, which everybody gives me, is, Tim, what's the point of 6/8? Why don't you just put 2 measures of 3/4 together? Wouldn't it be the same thing? Well, not exactly, and let me explain why. So music has this thing called accents in it, and you may have seen them, like we have one written out, right here. But there are actually natural accents that appear in music, and all an accent is when you're hitting a note with more emphasis. And let me tell you right now, to go through it, 4/4 time signature, probably the first one you learn. Remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4/4 time signature has a strong beat on beat 1, so an accent on beat 1, and then it has a lesser accent on beat 3. A lot of people, the beginners especially, don't know that. So instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's counted a little subtly different, like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The beats and the tempo are the same, but because certain beats have a certain emphasis on them, you could hear probably that last one had more of a driving forward feel. Let's take a look at 3/4 and see what the deal is. That's such a pain. You're just going to have to deal with the 6/8 next to it. So here we have a measure of 3/4. In 3/4, only the first beat gets accented. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now a measure of 6/8 is a little different. Remember how I said it loves to be split into those 2 groups of 3s? So now it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Whereas before it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, very monotonous. So now let me do this. Let me count a measure of 3/4, and then let me move right into this measure of 6/8 to see if you can see the difference. So here's, I'll do like 2 measures of 3/4. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 1, right into 6/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As you see, it had a lot more. I was playing at the same tempo. It had a lot more driving forward feeling. There's twice as many accents going on in that measure. And so, like I said, it just has more of a quicker feel to it than 3/4. Also, this is kind of silly. If you wrote out a piece in 3/4, it would take up a lot more measures, twice as many measures as if you wrote it in 6/8. I have some tips for you in 6/8, because I know when you first start to play in 6/8, it's going to be really crazy compared to playing 4/4, since all your note values are different and the way it's split up is different. So here, tip number 1, before you start playing, take a minute to look at your music. Make sure that you're really feeling the tempo before you start playing. Remember, you're not counting quarter notes, you're counting eighth notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You'd be surprised, especially if you're used to playing in 4/4, if you just jump into 6/8, you'll count them as 1 and 2 and 3, and no, you don't want that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, get the pacing right. Tip number 2 is to play slower than usual. Obviously, there's more going on per measure, like we talked about with the pacing between 3/4 and 6/8. And also, you're just playing something new, so slow it down. You don't need to go so fast. Number 3, especially if you're a beginner, count your pieces in 6 individual beats first. you know how I told you could count them as 6 or 1, 2. Count them as 6 first. It makes it a little bit easier. And then once you learn the piece, then try playing it in 2. And I'll play an example here in a minute what the differences between those two would sound like. Speaking of playing 6 versus 2, what I want to do is I want to play this piece, House of the Rising Sun. I'm going to play the first like 4 or 5 measures of it in 6 individual beats, and then I'm going to play it counting in 2, and I want to see if you can tell the difference, and I'll tell you the difference anyway once I'm done. So here's counting in 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now I'm going to count it in 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. So if you're listening carefully, the 6 individual beats had more of a slogging along type of, I don't know what other word to have it with it. It just lacked emphasis. It was just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, ba da 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 da. Are you guys annoyed yet? And then in the 2, you could clearly hear that accent on beat 1, da da 2, 1. Almost like you could dance to it, right? So you could tell the difference there. So playing in 2 is the way you do want to go, but play in 6 in the beginning to make it easy. So House of the Rising Sun was a piece that I just mentioned that's great for 6/8. And actually, if you notice, it is split into those groupings of 2 eighth note 3 groupings. You know what I'm talking about. So anyway, we have House of the Rising Sun. I highly recommend this one if you're looking for a great piece to introduce you to 6/8. It's not overly difficult, but some other ones are Alleluia. And there is one, hold on. If you have the Alfred's Adult Piano Series, there's one in there. There's actually quite a few 6/8 pieces, but one called Night Song. I always really enjoyed this one. Also, actually, this one's probably a bit easier than Alleluia and the other one. So if you happen to have this book, there's some great pieces in there for you, just to give you some lists of pieces to start learning in 6/8. So we spent all this lesson talking about 6/8, but while we're here, I thought it would be a good idea to just talk about some other time signatures that end in 8, and 9/8 is one of them. And guess what? I like to think about 9/8 as 9 eighth notes. How about that? And it works literally the same way. Let me show you. Okay, it works exactly the same as 6/8. We have 9 individual beats here, or we have 3 groupings of 3. So that's going to sound like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or much easier, 1, 2, 3. Now question, where do you think the accented beats are? The ones that get more emphasis in 9/8. Well, it's quite simple. It's literally the same as 6/8. It's just at the beginning of each of those groups of 3s. Now, what about 3/8? Well, 3 eighth notes. Okay, 3/8. You have 3 eighth notes. It's counted as 1, 2, 3, and that's it. Or you could just count it as 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, just like that. Very simple. But there are actually a lot of other ones. There's also 12/8. That would just be 12 individual beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. But 4 groupings of 3s, just to throw that one in there real quick. I didn't write it out, but I do want to write this one out because there actually are a couple other time signatures that end in 8, mainly being 5/8 and 7/8. But before we do that, is the power tip. And today's power tip, it kind of goes along with what I was saying earlier, but it applies to every time signature, every time. You want to count out a few measures before you start playing any piece. It's going to help you maintain a correct tempo, helps like kind of figure out your tempo even before you start playing, because you'd be surprised if you just jump into it how all over the place your tempo will be. So always remember to count before you play. Okay, I'm going to talk about some interesting time signatures like 5/8 and 7/8, and then there's a bonus tip at the end, so make sure you stick around for that. But on to 5/8. 5/8. another compound time signature. However, because it's an odd number but not divisible by 3, we can't group it into our groupings of 3 anymore. Because remember, 6, 8, 1, 2, 9, 8, 1, 2, 3. But with this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, that's weird. So let me show you how that's going to work. Okay, you got a couple of different options. You can count it as 1, 2, well, obviously in 3 individual parts, but you can do it as a group of 2 and a group of 3. And the accent would be on the beginning of each of those. So let me show you basically what that's going to sound like. Oh, the piano already up. Here we go. So that's just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1. So there's a little bit of an uneven kilter to it. Now, you're saying, Tim, could I do 3 versus 2? Or 3 and 2? Absolutely. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice how it has a different bit of a galloping forward motion. So here's the first one. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Here's the other one. 1, 2, 3. So just reverse, but it does have a different type of feel to it. You're going to see that more in jazz and more contemporary modern, well, quote unquote modern music. But you're also going to see this time signature a lot in jazz, which is 7/8, another strange one. We don't have, it's not divisible by 3, so we can't go 1, 2, 3. You get the idea. So what are our options? We have actually quite a few. Okay, 7/8. We got a grouping of 3 and then 2 groupings of 2s. Our accents will be here, here, and here. So this is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1. On the other side, you can have 2 groupings of 2s and then a grouping of 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then you can throw the grouping of 3 in the middle, which is, I think, a bit less common, but here we go. And that's the ways you can count 7/8. I do want to know, I have a question for you to leave in the comments. Do you want me to talk more about 5/8, 7/8, or even some of the more complicated compound time signatures beyond 6/8, 9/8, 12/8? Let me know if you want me to talk more about those time signatures, maybe go through like some common rhythm patterns you would see, or maybe some not so common like syncopated rhythms. I want to know in the comments if there's a lot of interest in those types of lessons. I'll certainly make a whole lesson just on these like 5/8s, 7/8s. Let me know your opinion down below. I would love to hear it. So I have the most important tip for you now on playing 6/8 or any time signature, and that is to check out this lesson in particular about common rhythm patterns you need to know learning piano. And if you've actually seen that video, I want you to watch this one instead. So thanks for coming, everybody. It's been your piano teacher, Tim, here, and I'll see you, yes you, in the next lesson. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah.